Okay. It's 3 o'clock on February 5th, 2018 for the meeting of the Architectural Advisory Committee. We ask everyone to silence your cell phones and pagers. Oh, sorry. Planning Director, if we can have roll call.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Member Dosi. Present. Member Jakeway.
Present.
Member Lockyer.
Present.
Member McCoy. Present. Member Rotman. Here. Vice Chair Cassidy.
Present.
Chair Song.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Madam Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, February the 1st. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Thank you. Does the committee have any revisions to the agenda for today? Okay, do we have a motion to accept the agenda? Okay, by Member Cassidy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Since this is a public meeting, audience members are permitted to comment on any issue that's within this committee's purview. Comments on an item appearing on today's agenda are made at the time the item is presented. If you'd like to speak on an item that is not on today's agenda, you may do so now. You have about 3 minutes. I believe everybody's here for the cases, so we're going to proceed with last week's meeting notes. And before I do that, Director Flynn, on minutes of January 16th, 2018, we have Member Lockyer, McCoy, Song, and Rodman. Are 4 enough?
Let's see, Lockyer, McCoy, Song, and Rotman. Yes, 4 is enough. It constitutes a quorum.
Okay, very good. So any comments on the January 16th minutes?
I abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Correct. Same with Tom, and same with...
I also abstain.
Right, and same with Kenny. Yep. So there's no comments.
I move to accept.
Okay, move to accept. Thank you. We're going to also do the minutes for January 2nd. Now, in this case, we do have Member Jakeway, Member Cassidy. Obviously, Tom will be abstaining. Any comments on the January 2nd?
I move we accept.
Okay. Thank you. All those in favor of both minutes?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Okay, so we'll move on with the consent calendar. Unfinished business. Packwood's Canyon Investors LLC, owner, to establish a sign program for the multi-tenant commercial complex that will be developed as the Scene Palm Springs, located on 601 to 789 East Packwood's Canyon Way. Before staff report, I believe we have one of our members.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to excuse myself from this agenda item as I've been involved in design work on the project.
Thank you. Okay. We'll give a minute to Tom to head to the media room. Okay, staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. As you'll recall, at your last meeting on January 16th, you reviewed the sign program request involving partial redevelopment of the courtyard at Palm Springs. It's to be rebranded as the Scene in Palm Springs. And at that meeting, the committee expressed a number of concerns and comments relating to the overall quantity, size, and design of the sign package, and directed the applicant to study the program further. And so what we have before you is the revised sign program. It includes revisions to the overall signage, and I'll go through that here on the screen. You'll see, what you see here first is the site plan that was reviewed the last time, noting the locations of the various signs and the color bars on the site plan. And what you see, I have circled on the screen, are all the signs that have been removed. So they've reduced the overall size or quantity of signs on the upper fascia, the bank building that you see on the top left of the screen. They had 3 signs on the upper fascia of that building. All 3 of those have been removed. They've removed 4 signs on the 3-story office building at the rear of the center, as you see here circled. And they've also removed 2 signs on the new pad buildings in the center of the site. You see circled the blue bars there. So here's the revised site plan without those signs that were previously proposed. So those signs have been removed. They're just going to retain the existing sign on the bank building that is there currently, and they're requesting approval for the 3 signs on the upper fascia of the bank building on the north side and 1 on the south side, in addition to the other signs that you see for the shop and retail tenants on the ground floor. The original submittal had an elevation facing Tahquitz that, some of the committee members expressed concerns that there wasn't enough information. So the applicant has revised the package to show the proposed signs on both the building at the front as well as the building at the back. So in addition to removing the signs that you saw previously proposed on the upper fascia of the bank building, those have been removed from this program. They have also shown on this elevation, on the revised submittal, the proposed monument signs, which are obviously very small in this wide street view elevation of the site. But you'll note that right below where it says revised submittal, on that elevation where it says A1, D2, D1, B, and A2, those are the proposed locations of the freestanding and/or monument signs. Here's the west elevation of the project site. So you'll see here the original submittal on top and the revised submittal on the bottom. The original submittal had, as I noted, the 2 signs on the upper fascia on the street view. Those have been removed. So the only sign that is proposed on the west elevation is the proposed restaurant tenant, which is on the ground floor on the interior of the shopping complex. The rear of the site you see the original submittal on the top with the 3 signs on the upper fascia, actually, excuse me, 4 signs. They have removed 3 of those 4 signs, and all you see is the revised submittal here, the 1 sign under where it says B on the bottom. One item that they submitted subsequent to the package going out was the sign brightness. So this information is now on the plan, which is the highlighted on the screen here, where it talks about the lumens of the sign brightness. So this says that it would be from 5 feet from the sign face, you'd have 20 lumens at 6,500 K, and then 10 feet, it would be 4 lumens at 6,500 K. They've also provided sign sample examples that they anticipate for the shopping center from other examples in the city. So that's another exhibit that was added to the sign program. And just in general, overall, they've made some changes to the proposed renderings of the buildings and the signs that are potentially where they're proposed to be located. Instead of just doing a block letter, it could be a cursive letter or another type of font. So it just kind of is updating the exhibits to show that there will be variations in the types of fonts that in the locations that they are proposed. They did revise some of the materials. You see on the left of this screen, the original submittal had the blade sign with a wood material. That wood material has been eliminated, and on the bottom is the revised submittal, the revised design, which incorporates some of the gray metal that's on the building, the new buildings. This is the freestanding signs that are proposed throughout the center. This is the site plan that you saw at your last meeting. And this shows what I've circled here on the bottom are the 2 signs that have been eliminated. So they've reduced the quantity of freestanding signs in the proposal. They've reduced it from 7 to 5 along Talkwitz. The two existing signs will be replaced as well. So the revised submittal shows the signs being removed from that site plan. As it relates to the design, there were some comments about the wood material and proposing an alternate material to match something with the new building. So what they've done is they've shown the revised material in place of the wood, which is a metal material. And instead of 4 of those signs, as I noted, there are only 2 on the corners of street corners along Talkwitz. In addition to this, as you'll recall, at the last meeting, there were 2 options for this monument sign. This option here at the top, which shows 3 tenant names, and then another option which showed Signature Executive Suites occupying all 3 tenant names, the space where those 3 tenant names are now. They've eliminated that proposal and instead are proposing only the 3 tenant name signs on the monument sign. They've revised the design of one of the other freestanding tenant identification signs along Talkwitz. You see they've eliminated the wood material and they're now proposing the gray metal material. The 2 signs that are existing were the sign that was proposed at the location. Again, they've redesigned it to remove the wood material in place, adjusted the design with some of the stone, adding some of the stone and a vertical element to the sign, and incorporating the metal material. So one last thing that they also did was, since this packet went out, they did revise what we'll call pole signs for the project. So there's 2 of them that are proposed, consistent with the location that was previously shown. So they've redesigned the elevation here. You see on the left was the original elevation. What you have in your packet is slightly different than what you see here, because this has been a change since that packet went out. So this, and as I said, the lighting addition was also a change since the packet went out. But this does show more of trapezoidal elements, signs, as opposed to curved radius type signs. So that's one revision that you do not have in your packet, but this is the proposed pole signs. So what I did for the committee, you'll note as an attachment to your staff memo, you'll see attachment 3, listing all of the concerns that were expressed at the meeting in a table showing how the applicant has responded to those concerns, identifying some of the reductions in signage in terms of quantity and sign area, adding some additional exhibits to the program, and staff's comments on what we felt would be additional controls to ensure that the sign program remain compatible should future signage come forward, and just to make things a little bit more clear. So there were 3 items that we recommend as a part of those enhancements, and those are the same 3 as listed on the second page of your staff report. First being the 3rd-story fascia sign shall be a halo-type lighting, no front-lit letters. The second recommendation is to limit 3rd-story signs to no more than 60 square feet in area. And then finally, that all tenant main wall signs not exceed 2 per tenant. So I'll conclude with that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is also here to make a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions for staff? Yes, Member Tom.
Right now, there's a sculpture on the corner of Talkwitz and Alvarado. If that's being removed, was that sculpture something that was required of the original developer as part of the public arts program?
I'm not certain on that. I may have to ask the applicant to answer that. I know that that is that installation is more recent than originally, the project was originally developed, so he can probably elaborate on
It
that.
might even have been installed by the city as part of the public arts program, so I just want to make sure we don't lose it.
Other questions? David, couple of questions. I think the gooseneck light fixture is an option versus the backlit. It's an option to us to be considered. Is that true?
For which sign?
Actually, for the pole and
There's,
if you see
yeah, page 25 also has, well, no, sorry, not 25.
page 27,
28 and 27?
27 and 28, yes.
Yeah, so it allows for the gooseneck or an LED wash type lighting.
But these are not to be proposed with the backlit.
It's, it does say that they could be white LEDs, so it could be backlit.
Okay, and then when you refer to your staff recommendations of item number 3, limit main wall sign, are those referring to ones at the corner?
Those are referring to,
Page 24?
no, so those are only referring to the wall signs. So on the new buildings,
Oh, got it. At the canopy overhangs.
right, so
Okay.
to avoid having signs repeated
Triple.
all around the building.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Member Robert.
Hi, David, thank you. Just a couple things to clarify on your recommendations. The third floor, number 1, third-story fascia signs be halo-type lighting. So as I look at what's submitted on page 21, it calls it out for internal halo-lit channel.
Correct.
So is that in contrast to what you're recommending?
No, that coincides with our recommendation.
Okay, all right. And then the same thing with number 2, you said a maximum area of 60 square feet per office tenant sign. And again, I don't see in the package where they show the office tenant sign, but the signature is less than 60 square feet as it's being proposed again on page 21. So it's just setting a cap. Is that what you're doing?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, is the applicant present?
Afternoon, Sam Rasmussen, 1919 Grand Avenue, San Diego. I'm the owner of the property. And for clarification purposes, to answer a couple of the committee's questions, so I installed that modular art piece about maybe 10 years ago. And it's not part of Art in Public Places, and we intend to, since that location is going to be a fountain now, we'll be relocating that art piece. The pole signs that we propose are not to be internally illuminated. That was going to be too bright and too in your face. We wanted them. We provided staff pictures of pole signs that are part of the gardens at El Paseo, and so it would only be stock lighting and soft down lighting on a panel with a nice tenant name. Or they do make a system now on the outside with a little LED wash down, but they're just panels, no internal illumination.
Okay, thank you.
It's meant to be understated and not in your face. And I can't remember the third question. It's always been halo, backlit halo lighting, and did I miss one that I could answer?
No, but we just got started, so.
Thank you, and I don't think I really have any comments. I worked awful hard to reduce the sign program tremendously. I tried to listen to all of your comments, did the best I can. The signage program is a key to any successful retail project. You just physically cannot build a project without reasonable signage, and that's why this project has failed twice. It's just if you don't have signage and let people know what's happening inside your project with some reasonable signage on Tockwitz, it's difficulties. But I think everyone on this committee knows that, and happy to answer questions, but don't have any other presentation remarks.
Thank you, Sam. Anyone here to comment on this project? Seeing none, questions for the applicant. Member Tom?
The signs that are on the third floor of the office building that are on the north side facing Tockwitz, the one in the middle, the signature sign, I can perfectly see how you see that looking down the walkway you've put. The other two signs that would be tenant signs, it seems to me once those sunken buildings are replaced with full one-story high buildings, I drove on the opposite side of Tockwitz today, and you can't see that fascia. I wonder if it's even worth trying to get those approved, since I doubt they'll ever be beneficial.
A good question. Yes, of course, a building that's set back 150, 200 feet from Tockwitz is going to have limited visibility, even if the front buildings weren't there. If you drove by, you have to look at a right angle or left angle to see them. But they're critical to our project because we've had national credit tenant stock brokerage firms come to us, and they won't go into a building where they don't have building signage, even if it's restricted visibility and whatnot. So it's something that's important for their national package, and they can default to limited restriction, but they can't default to no signage. They just can't get it approved through corporate, and that's why it's there. And it's for the larger tenants that would go back. That office building to the rear is 80,000 square feet. It's a big building.
Hey, Member John.
So the blade signs that were mentioned earlier, they're drawn to look very much like the pole signs out front in terms of compatibility in design. But you've got internal lighting on the blade signs and front lighting on the street
And we could go
signs.
either way on those blade signs. There's some beautiful blade signs with internal illumination that have multi-textures and whatnot on them. We can go either direction. The key is for the tenants to the rear of the new buildings, as people come on in on Tockwitz and they're looking left or right, they see and can see that there's something further into the project. And the same as they're coming in through the breezeways. It's just a little bit more identification, especially for the rear tenants in the project.
Okay. With one of the slides that was presented last time with the pole style signage from Palm Desert didn't have any lighting.
All the Palm Desert signs had the stalk lighting.
Did they have that? Okay, I missed that. And okay, go ahead.
Thank you, John. Okay, Member Sean. Okay, Member Kenny.
Hi there. I do have one question. I apologize in advance. I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I will do my best to avoid repeating anything. But my understanding is that one of the concerns in the last meeting was that some of the signage was too colorful or too bright and not sort of fitting in with the Palm Springs style or the landscape or the natural colors. So I was wondering if you could, on that note, talk a little bit about the revised pole signage that we're looking at? Because it seems to me that we went in the opposite direction from that comment.
Well, my architect just designed this pole signage on the right, and I'm more of a bin to the left, and he brought it in. But they're both non-illuminated. They're made. They're at the end of the day, they're going to be soft colors and much nicer design and motif and whatnot. We're not going to do any block letters. We're trying to approve a concept. The idea here is very soft illumination, either through the little eyelet signs or a downlit LED. Very soft.
Sam, if I think we're right now the new design you have right now, you're using 3 primary colors. Actually, not the turquoise, but
Oh, it'd be softer. I don't think the architect really it was trying to define colors because we don't know the tenants yet and corporate colors and whatnot. It's more of a placemat for the size of the sign, the illumination, that it's compatible pole-wise and stone at the bottom with the building, and then let the tenants come in with very soft and varying colors. But we're not going to go red, green, blue. I mean, that little pattern's in your face, and it's not meant to represent what the sign's going to look like color-wise.
okay.
Thank you.
So, Sam, I appreciate all the efforts, and you're back on the very next AA meeting, so I know that a lot of work has been put together. My question was more related to your monument signage at the corner of each intersection. The length of that is about 18'6". I frequent that theater more than I can. And so I love that corner where the artwork is located, and then you have that tier sort of landscaped shrub. So I'm wondering how you can fit the 18'6" on that corner, as well as where the other bank is located. I understand where the tenant name is going, that's only about 5-6 feet, but the entire length is pretty long on that corner.
It's set at an angle, and once again, it's concept, and if you care to tighten it up or put a use restriction to get it 10 or 12 feet or tighten it up to make it look boutique-y, we're good. We're happy to do that. We're not trying to design anything that's up and in your face. The Renaissance Hotel sign directly across the street that is approved is, I think, 2 or 3 times bigger than this sign. But we don't want them to look good as people. We want them. We don't want them in your face. That's why they're not illuminated. That they're uplit and soft.
Okay. Okay, very good. Any other questions? Oh yeah, Member Tom.
Kind of a procedural question. Are we approving today just a sign program, and each of the individual signs will come to us when they have their actual design? Or does the developer now have free reign to kind of, as long as it's within this concept, bring the, just the whole concept of all the fonts changing or the colors changing? I think those pretty significantly affect the concept, and I just wonder if they're going to be required to bring that back for our review.
David, can you help us with that?
Sure, yeah. So with any sign program, essentially what it is it becomes the governing document for the site. And in order to streamline tenant identification signs when they come forward, it is essentially an over-the-counter approval should it conform to the sign program. With the sign program, what you are looking at is essentially the location, size, and design framework of the signs that are as they're presented. So where they're all located, the sizes of those locations, and then, of course, there's certain things that would not change. Like, for instance, what you see on the screen. The only thing that would change for this would be the tenant names within that framework. But, everything else would essentially be the same unless they rebranded the center and they changed to the shopping district, and then just the scene text would be replaced. So that essentially is what we're looking at.
Thank you, David. Yes, Member Tom.
I'm happy with these signs with the continuity of the background colors on the 3 tenant names being the same, and it appears the font would be the same. I think if we saw a sign in the future that is red and yellow and blue with different fonts, it would look really jumbled. And I would just want to note, are we losing control of that sort of review?
That would be now part of our discussion and our guidance, further guidance to this recommendation that we can discuss.
Would also just note that there are certain limitations that the city can impose when it comes to signage because of the, corporate fonts. The city is not able to restrict. Every single font has to be the same, and it has to be the same color. So it's something that the Supreme Court took away from us a while ago.
Thank you. So highly recommended. Okay. Thank you. We will deliberate now. Thank you.
Thank you. My final comment, a good comment on that sign. We want those signs to be elegant, and so once again, they're not internally illuminated. They're externally illuminated only with uplights where the tenant names are. And so we're envisioning little offset channel letters that are offset like a ½ inch or an inch to give it some elegance. The best signs that we can provide for the project in the city.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, I'd like to start the comments with Member Tom.
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I might repeat some things that other people have said or that were already resolved. But I do want to say I'm very impressed with the developer to have listened so well to the committee and was so willing to cut back on the size and number of these signs. The pole sign, to my eye, I appreciate the first style better than the second with the points on it, but I think that's going to be a personal preference for anybody. I totally get the concept of wanting to have 3 different tenants be able to be identified. I think the frontage along Tahquitz is so long that the number of signs they're proposing certainly isn't out of context for what you see on Tahquitz. So I just think that we should try to make sure that we have some sort of verbiage in the final that discusses colors. And I totally understand what David is saying about corporate colors and issues, but if there were a color palette that was established that could be used throughout the project other than for corporate, that might be a good solution.
So, Tom, clarification. 2 questions I want to ask you is that the first design, what comes to you is that is more harmonious to the exterior building design. However, what about the geometry?
I like the geometry. I think it's softer. This one looks like a logo from one of the local pizza places. Is it Domino's, I think, maybe? And it just doesn't seem to have the nuance that the first one has.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, Member John.
So I appreciate not having the signage on the rear of the buildings, the office buildings. I know you're going for major tenants. Even that halo signage on the upper levels, it's not really visible from the site. It's not going to be very visible from the drive-by. So really, as you get further away, I didn't go explore how far away you can see the top of that structure, but it feels more billboard-ish So I also understand your desire to get big tenants in there. If there can be a turn off time limit that the lights are on these upper signs. Don't have the billboards burning all night. Some of the, it's just a really, really bright project. All of the glass, all of the lit signs, nobody's going to miss it. So keeping, I think my comment with the fin signs is I would like to see them not be lit internally. I'd like to see them lit matching the pole sign with the exterior lighting on them. We've got, proposed signage on top of, mounted on top above each doorway, and then the fin signs being lit, and it's just a lot going on. So I also agree with your comment that the corner signs, if they could be better scaled with the corner, I agree with that. I'll stop there.
Okay, Member Robert.
Well, I commend the applicant for making the changes. I think it's vastly improved. I think I would recommend, personally, I would recommend approving it with the 3 conditions that staff has proposed. I just did see finally where the office tenant sign was being proposed, and it's proposed at a maximum of 120 square feet as opposed to 60, which is what staff is recommending, and I think that would make a huge difference. Although I agree with Member Tom that actually the places you can see it are probably limited. But if it's important for getting tenants in there, I think that's important to have a successful project. So I think I would agree that I think having the office tenant signs at the 60 square foot maximus is something that I could support. And I don't know, the pole signs, I'm kind of lukewarm on both designs. I think I'd like to see something that somehow or another pulls in more of the flavor of the architecture of the new building. I don't think the first one does it, and I'm not sure the second one does it either, but it's going as forward, so I would say I would go with it. I agree that maybe the blade signs might be more uniformly tie into the rest of the project if it were externally illuminated as opposed to internally illuminated.
Okay, Member Sean.
Yeah. Hey, David, can you repeat what your comment was about our judgment on the pole signage and with relation to logos?
So for the pole sign, number one is the location and the quantity. Is that something that is compatible with the sign program or with the shopping center? And then as far as the size of the signs that are on there, I mean, they're not too large. I mean, they're 7 feet, one's 7 feet by 18 inches. And then there's our 2 feet by 4 feet.
I think you mentioned something about Supreme Court, and that's what I'm interested in.
Sure. So there are certain sign programs that are very defined and very detailed in terms of, and these are a lot of some of our older sign programs that have very specific requirements in terms of your letter font types, the color of the font. Some of that has changed over time because of the Supreme Court cases that have essentially taken cities' right to make those requirements and not allow corporate branding of signs. So, the director may be able to give us some specifics on those court cases, but essentially what it is we can regulate location and area, and that's essentially it. although, you know, we try and get as much as we can in terms of the design, and it really becomes on the applicant if they're willing to accept that.
And let me just go one step further. We do have the ability to look at background materials. So for example, the background color that we had talked about earlier, the red, green, and the blue. As you see in the two examples, one has the beige background panels, the other one has the colored background panels. While we can't get into the color or the font for national tenants, we can get into the surface that that signage is placed on. And so if you all would like to discuss the design of the pole, the color of the pole, and those materials that construct it, then that would be fine and appropriate.
Okay. So with regard to the location of the ground signage,
The monument or the?
well, I'll get back to that specific one in a minute, but because that's one of the ground place signage that I think is D1 and D2 on the site plan shown on page 22. Page 22 that we have is the latest, David, with I think shows 5 signs placed on the ground along Tockwitz and then one on each Alvarado and El Segundo. But all the plan and location, I think, is okay with me. It's still what I think is not are the specific designs and kind of the unregulated background, if you will, that I think it's going to get a bit more chaotic with, and I'm just speaking about the ground signage for now. If there's no regulation or limitation on these colors of background and that sort of thing, and I guess that's would seem like why the initial proposal appealed to me more than the second, the revised, is because of it seemed a bit more subtle and not so wild, and not quite sure what we're going to end up with from tenant to tenant as life goes on here with this project. I think some further regulation or limitation on what we allow for this background should be decided on, whether it's today or in the future, for all of the ground place signage on both Tockwitz and the 2 side streets. The building signage, I know some of our other members here think that we're not going to see it, but to me it's huge, it's extremely high, it's really well lit and bright, and I appreciate that the owner of the project has some issue with who he's leasing to or even occupying those spaces without there being signage available for these tenants. I'd really like to see it another place for it. I feel like this project is extremely bright with all of the glass and the indoor lighting from the interior, and it's just getting brighter and brighter, especially with the signage on the eave, particularly facing Tockwitz. That's about all.
So, Sean, let me break it down. On the A1 signages, if you see the renderings that they have proposed, there's really essentially, 4 materials that are common, which is the wall cap, the stone veneer, the gray metal. My memory serves me well.
A1 and A2 are the 2 signs at the corners.
Yes, so that's page 23. So what you see on the screen that's revised submittal, that's in keeping with building materials. So those are the 2 signages. The additional 2 are the ones on page 25. Which are the B signage. Which essentially has the same material but the tenant name has a white paint rather than the black paint of the monument signage. So in keeping with the same, it would be either alternated to the white or alternate to the black, so we're not considering one more color. So that's in keeping with the family of material.
Are you sure? Because what I read on both page 25 and 23 are the words, color to be determined, landlord's discretion, color to be determined, landlord's discretion, color to be determined, landlord's discretion. And I see that on the background of those. And so what I worry about in that scenario is what that pole sign looks like on the proposed version, which we're going to get a red band, a green brand, and a blue.
Totally get it, yeah, I'm with you. So therefore, the, where he says, color to be determined landlord discretion, it should be color to match main field color of the building. That would give it a direction of which is the background color. So we're not surprised with a Starbucks green, background color.
Yeah.
To make that recommendation.
Okay, that would appeal to me.
Now, we're going to take it one more step, which is the poles, okay? The poles, okay? So our concern is the background colors as well as the sharp edges of the geometry of the new proposed pole. I agree that the sharp angles of the new design are not really respecting, the architecture. If anything, it makes it more cartoonish or something. So I think they're going in the right direction, but I think it still needs to be more in keeping with the architecture. So, for example, one of the suggestions is that my issue with the goosenecks is that there is no gooseneck fixture whatsoever in any of the buildings. So if there could be a channel, just like you're saying, area exterior lighting, not internal lighting, but a flush lighting that comes from a channel that's from above, is one less architectural feature that is sticking out from this composition. Does that make sense? Yes. So that will be the direction that we can give them as far as the pole design. And then also the background will be in keeping with the field color of the building. And that would help tie what happens on Tackwitz. So is that sort of okay?
That's, if you're asking me if that's heading down the road of where I'd like to see this go.
Okay.
That's getting there.
Okay.
That still doesn't address the issue that I take with the
Third
eave.
floor. Lighting. Okay. Now going to the building lightings, did you have any questions or comments? Okay, blade lightings? But you agree about the goosenecks? Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go to Kenny and then I'll come back to you. Okay, Kenny.
I would generally concur with all the comments that are made. The two, I think your leading the witness worked well. That addressed most of the concerns that I had jotted down. The two things that I'll reiterate and agree with is the pole signage design keeping in or inspired by the architecture. I think that's where I was looking at both of them, and neither one of them is, I think, there. So I want to reiterate that, and then also the comment that was made, I think, by John, talking about having the lighting on the, I understand the concern about the large signage on the third floor eave, and having the lighting have an off time at night, I think might help alleviate that. I know I used to live across the street in an urban environment from a parking structure that had a Wells Fargo signage on the side of the parking structure where each of the letters was about 10 feet tall. And at something like 11 p.m. it shuts off and I could see the light change in my living room. So I have always been able to appreciate okay, business, we're closed for business, we don't need that signage on the side of the building anymore. So that might be one thing to recommend to help alleviate that. And there may be other suggestions too, but I don't have it.
Thank you. Okay, Member John.
Back to the ground mounted. Illumination for the ones
Yes.
at page 25.
Yes. So in this case, I think we would go with external illumination, so it's cohesive. And then the font color that is at the, I'm sorry, not, whatever the font, if it is black at the monument sign, then it should be black in the smaller monument sign, so that it's cohesive and we're not switching back and forth as we go down the street. I think that's what we're saying. Okay, so I'm concerned about this. Okay, the third floor signage. There's a part of me that says in order to meet the corporate client requirements, because they can't think outside and they have to check off the list that their logo is on the third floor. When we, I think, instinctively know that there's not going to be seen on Tackwitz because of the high roof of the new addition. And we're also asking for it to be on timers. So I think we have two ways of not seeing it all the time on Tackwitz, except for the executive signature. On. Yeah, but I want to see if there is a different, I know Sean expressed his concerns, but is there other concerns that we have on Tackwitz? We're taking a while to review this project because we all know that this is very important and we all know that it has been a challenge from the very beginning. So I want to see if there are other solutions that we could perhaps come up with. Perhaps it's a dimmer light, or I don't know, I'm just making things up in my head for that third floor. John?
If you're asking, I think that not lit at all might be an option. But however, I still feel that it takes away from the architecture on that eve, as it did when there was something proposed on the side buildings, like the bank at the corner. And so I still have a difficult time with it. I also don't know that I want to design it for them. Surely there's another option for placement of marquee signage for a flagship tenant in some other location besides on the eve of the buildings above the 30-foot mark, which is what they're requesting as an acceptance from the code. Exception, rather. So every item here is an exception to the code. And so, except out of 7, there's 2 that are not. So I think we're making quite a bit of concessions here for that, and that's one that I think, I'm not convinced that you won't see it from Tackwitz. I'm not convinced that you won't see it from further down the street or further away or somebody else's house around the corner, because I think it's loud and bright and really freaking tall. So I think I don't know, I don't feel.
Okay. Okay, so we have very specific recommendations that I'd like to go over as Kenny already has started. The length of the monument design at 18'6", I believe that it should be reduced by 30% in order to work best with the corner situation. One take at this is that instead of me limiting it to 30%, that the candidate could come back with the actual plan layout of the landscape and the corner architectural site to see how it works with the building as well as the corner situation with the new monument signage. That could be a different consideration so that we get a more complete picture of how the monument signage would work within the context. That's one. Two is that the background colors that are being used in the ground signage should match the field color of the architectural buildings. Three is that the type of lighting, in which this case is outdoor exterior litten, be consistent in all the ground lighting. Four is that the color of the font should match consistently on the ground signage as well. Four is that the pole signage should be redesigned to, again, match closer to the architectural style. And the lights is acceptable that they're exteriorly litten, but that it should be a integral frame and not a surface-mounted gooseneck fixture. That it should be integrated with the frame of the design rather than a surface-mounted cantilevering fixture. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. I think that wraps the ground signage. Have I left anything out for ground signages? On microphone.
The internal, there we go, of 6,500. For the external illumination, directional illumination onto the signs, a warmer color temperature would feel much better as a pedestrian walking along, something down 3,000 Kelvin or below. My hope that the client would, the owner would go in that direction.
Okay. Okay. As far as the blade signage, did we have any comments on the blade signages about being also exteriorly litten? No gooseneck, but exteriorly litten with an integrated frame. So it matches also the pole lighting. Okay. So I think now we're down to the third story signage.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could I just have you clarify that again? On the blade signage, it should be externally illuminated,
Externally illuminated,
but no gooseneck fixtures?
but no gooseneck fixture.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so third floor signage, the staff recommends for half the surface area to be limited to what is being proposed on tack widths. And one of the comments that were brought up is if it's timed in such a way that after business hours or after business hours, that if the light gets turned off so it doesn't become a nuisance for after hours. I think that's the recommendation, or one of the options that has been discussed. So at this point, is there a motion or additional discussion on the third floor signage?
The 11 p.m. was thrown out as a time to turn off. I don't know, our sound ordinances and other kind of closing things down around town, other than in downtown, it's 10 p.m. Some of the other direction that the town is given with other ordinances.
There's such ordinance?
The city's noise ordinance has a break at 10 p.m., and so that might be a natural place to do it. And again, this is only towards the third floor signage on the building.
Okay, do I hear a motion? Yes, Member Tom.
Please help me if I forget something, because it is confusing. I agree with the staff suggestion that there be halo lighting, so that is going to reduce the amount of light that those upper signs produce. I think reducing the maximum area to 60 square feet also reduces the amount of light significant that those are going to produce. And I think putting a time limit on the upper third level lighting kind of is the final piece that makes it acceptable to me. So I would like to move that that's how we approve these signs.
Okay, so Tom, pretend that was a draft. 2 items that I like to see if we can take it to subcommittee would be, one will be the design of the poles, and second will be the placement of the monument signage on the corners, based on all the discussions that we had.
Yes, I agree. I was really just talking about the third floor lighting, so to add those into it, that makes sense.
Okay, so I believe Member Tom is putting a motion together based on the list that we have provided for the ground fixtures, signage, the third floor, as well as the blade signage.
That's correct.
Do you want me to read those back for you?
Sure.
Okay. So in terms of what has been proposed on the monument signs, number one, the length of the monument signs should be reduced by 30% or reviewed by the subcommittee, as you've just appended that. Number two, the background colors of the monument sign shall be consistent with the field color of the buildings. Number three, the type of lighting for the monument sign shall be consistent. Number four, the color of the font on the monument sign shall also be consistent. And number five, the pole signage should be redesigned to match the architecture of the building. Lighting for the pole signage should be integral to the frame and not using gooseneck fixtures. And then I have an additional comment from Member McCoy about the color temperature on the monument signs should be about 3,000 degrees Kelvin instead of the 6,500, I believe, that was proposed. On the blade signs, number one, blade signage should be externally illuminated with no gooseneck fixtures. And then the only condition on the third floor is, the condition on the third floor is the lighting should be on a timer, which would turn off at 10 p.m., and then also incorporating the recommendations of staff in terms of the square footage. Did that capture all of the points of the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
And so Tom has made a motion. All those in favor?
Let's
Oh, I'm
see.
sorry, we need a second.
We need a second.
Second.
Okay, Member John. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Thank you.
Let's see. Madam Chair, let's say I believe this is the item. Yeah, we're going to be playing musical committee members here. Unfortunately, Member McCoy has a business within 500 feet of item number 3 on the agenda, and so he will be recusing himself from this item, and we'll invite you back as soon as we're done with the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on to new business, Realty Trust Property Manager for the Jane London Living Trust for a sign program for the multi-tenant building located at 363 South Palm Canyon Drive. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it certainly is Sign Program Day here at the AAC. This particular sign program is a fairly straightforward one, and I want to just go here to the elevation of the building. This is a building that's been in the city here for several years, and the sign program has just come in. The building has some challenges in terms of its facade and the visibility of the available spaces where a sign might be placed. Everything, and I want to also introduce Sarah Shands, who's been extremely helpful in working with staff on bringing this project into conformance with the zoning ordinance and the sign ordinance. But as you see on this particular elevation, there are really fairly small areas on this building where main tenant signs are able to be placed. It's basically been designed as a 4-tenant building on the first floor and 2 or more tenants on the second floor. There is one major tenant that's currently in the building, I believe, and Sarah can qualify this, that's occupying more than 1 suite. But the sign program is set up, of course, over the long term so that if this tenant were to leave and other smaller tenants were to come in, each one would have a logical location for the signage. As you go through your staff report, you'll note that this is in the downtown, uptown area of the city, and so this is a specific part of the sign ordinance that applies to this part of town. And as I did mention, everything on this sign ordinance complies with 2 minor exceptions. Because of the challenge of those large metal canopies sticking on the building, the applicant has requested a monument sign. The monument sign is proposed at the northeast corner of the property, and if I can get to it here, it's a monument sign that actually conforms even to the parameters of a monument sign, which typically are allowed in commercial and industrial areas, but not in the downtown. In this particular case, because of the characteristics of the architecture of the building, staff believes that a monument sign as proposed is reasonable. And the other minor amendment that they have requested that is not consistent with the sign ordinance is for their second floor tenants. They have second floor tenants who really don't require tenant signs, and they are not really seeking tenant signs. However, as you were to go to this building and park in the parking lot behind it, and you come up to that center paseo that you see in the photo, there's a building directory that does allow patrons of those second floor tenant spaces to find their, the tenant to whom they're planning on going. So in summary, the signage on this building can be illuminated or not illuminated. As you can see on the 2 section details in the bottom part of this page, they're either a quarter plate letters that are standing off the surface of the building by about a ½ inch, or they may be flush mounted. If they're going to be internally illuminated, they, again, they're completely consistent with the sign ordinance. They can be a maximum of 7 inches. And of course, these would be, as you would normally see for downtown, there'd probably be a channel cut letter or something like that. So we were fairly pleased at the staff level in working with this applicant. We feel that it's a reasonable approach to a fairly challenging building to put signage on. The monument sign, as you see here, allows for the 4 tenants, if it were to be 4, to have their own spaces. These are done in, as it notes over there on the left side, aluminum plate with acrylic letters. So it's a very subtle and relatively small sign. Its overall height is 7 feet, and it's about 7 feet in width. This sign, I don't know if I have an image here. Yes, there we go, perfect. This is where the sign would be placed and its approximate orientation on the project site. You see there, actually between the first 2 canopies, there's a sign existing for a hearing aid company. And as is standard and consistent with our practice at the city, when we have sign programs come in and there's existing signage on the building, it's normally allowed to remain as long as that tenant is in that space. If that tenant were to change its name or require new signage, that's the time at which they would come in with signage that would have to conform to the new sign program. But we do allow legal non-conforming signs that were permitted to continue. That concludes my staff report. As I mentioned, Sarah's in the audience if you have any other questions, and I'm available to answer any questions. And we're recommending that you recommend approval to the City Council on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Yes, Member Robert.
Question for you, on the four tenant signs, I'm missing it, but what size is allowed for each of the tenant signs?
The sign is basically 1 square foot of sign area per lineal foot of tenant frontage, which is the standard for any part of the city. What will drive the limit on this is obviously the area that they have to put these signs. In addition, I want to point out to you, I believe it's on page 4 of the sign program, they also are requiring that, you know, they're not looking for a tenant to try to smash a sign in between these canopies. So they've actually required in their own parameters to make sure that those signs are set off from any edge of those signage areas by 6 inches. So you're not going to see this smashing of signs trying to crowd them in between the canopies. There'll be open space between the edge of the canopy, the edge of the fascia, the edge of the door columns, and the sign itself.
So worst case scenario, you've got 4 tenants. How much frontage does each tenant have?
I'm going to guess they're about 20 feet, but I'll have Sarah clarify that for you.
So we're talking potentially about 20 square feet of sign.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Member Tom.
Are we being asked to approve 4 different potential types of signs so that if each tenant wanted to do a different sign, they would all be different? Or are we selecting one of these 4 that would be a consistent sign that would be for the entire building?
The tenants themselves would propose to either have a non-illuminated sign or an illuminated sign. So the choices that are in the sign program would be the choices that a tenant would have available to them.
Okay. The other Member Tom?
I was going to ask that same question. So the tenant would have an option.
Correct.
To choose. Okay. Thank you.
And that's somewhat consistent with how we have in our other buildings downtown. Some may put illuminated signs, some may not.
Jake, wait, did you have another question? Okay.
Is the monument sign lit?
No.
Okay, is the applicant present?
I'm Sarah because she's not here.
Sorry, I thought she was.
I'm the actual sign
Okay,
maker.
name and address?
Jack Canyon Copy and Print, 242 North Palm Canyon Drive, Palm Springs.
Jack, would you like to add to the presentation? Are you ready for our questions?
I'm ready for your questions.
Okay. All right, questions for the applicant. I'd like to start with Member Robert.
The monument sign, this image right here versus what's on page 5, the dimensions on the monument sign are 7 feet 3 inches tall and 7 feet wide. And my concern was that I thought that was really overpowering in size for that corner and being right next to a sidewalk. The image you have there, I don't think really reflects the right perspective and scale of the sign. So do you have any, can you address that?
Well, it is to this, I'm not sure about the exact scale, but that's actually a sloped hill.
Yeah.
So it's actually at the base of the hill, so as it goes up, it doesn't sit 7 feet from the top staircase. It's more towards the ground. That's why it doesn't scale correctly in terms of how high it is, what it really is, because there's actually a huge slope that it will sit on towards the base of the slope. It's kind of hard to tell in the picture there.
Okay. And then, well, it's more for discussion, I guess. Thank you.
Okay. Member Tom, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Members, any questions? Member Sean?
Maybe a scale issue on the corner signage that unless those risers of the steps are 1 foot tall each, which they're probably not, that sign looks a bit smaller the way it's represented there than what's shown on the drawing. I do understand, however, the bulk of the signage is 6.5 feet tall. I do want, you know, at 14-inch high, the aluminum panels, if there's only 4 of them, I think we might be able to reduce that signage a bit and not lose too much of what you're trying to accomplish there. Maybe a foot or so, but I think that sound like you.
Easy enough?
So, Jack, do you know, as far as the signage being ever looked at, being able to be hung from each of those canopies rather than being installed in the back plaster wall?
The canopies, the material that it's made of,
Yeah.
I don't think was the reason they didn't have it. It's like aluminum, or it's not something that they wanted to attach to. That was one of their biggest concerns when we created this, and to put it in the middle, being that they didn't like how it would sit on there. And if you, once that sign's removed, you would have to remove the whole canopy. You can't just take a sign off and put a new one on there. You'd
Okay,
have massive amounts of holes in it that can't be repaired, from what I understand.
Okay. Yes, Ken?
I can clarify that question a bit because I asked the same question of the applicant as I was working with them on this. And it is an issue with the structural stability of those canopies. And as he mentioned, the fact that after a number of changeouts, those are going to become pretty riddled with holes.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you, Jack. Okay. Okay, I'm going to start from the very end. Member Tom?
I think that we should talk about the consistency of the signs and not approve the capability for there to be 4 different looking signs on such a compact building. I think to have a consistency of a sign program where they're all the same type, at least in physical size and location, would make some sense. I also agree with Sean. I think the scale, that looks like it's maybe a 4 foot by 4 foot, and they're asking us to prove a 7 foot by 7 foot. Maybe we should have a mock-up put there or something so we can see what that size of sign looks like.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Member Tom?
My concerns were the same, that I believe we should have a consistent program for each one of the tenants and also the scale of the corner sign.
Okay, thank you. Member Robert?
Yeah, I have an issue with the scale of the monument sign. I have an issue with the placement of the sign on the building. Even if we went ahead with the 4 signs, the height and location between the canopies I don't think really work well with the building. I think they should be a little lower if we're going to go that way. I agree there should be consistency in the type of sign. The building's very busy, and adding more complication with different types of design signs, I think would just make it worse. I might ask a question whether you could do 4 blade signs and lower on the, one of the columns, or even do a some sort of illuminated sign that's hanging down from the little soffit above one of the windows for each tenant. Maybe that's a better alternative to reduce some of the clutter on the building. So.
Thank you. Member Sean?
I agree with some of these suggestions I'm hearing about placement on an already busy building, adding a little lack of control with what those 4 signage items could look like. And just reiterate the corner signage size.
Member Lockyer, would you speak up just a little bit? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that, Ken. I think just said I'd like to reiterate what my thoughts were initially on that corner signage and the scale reduction. Did you hear the first part about the agreeing with the?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Member Kenny?
I find myself wondering if the monument sign, if we can get to it in the scale that it's shown in the photo, in the mock-up there, if that is enough. And assuming the answer will be no for each of the tenants, I would prefer to see something that makes the building less busy on the front. Proposed. So I'm agreeing with the comments that are made. Maybe a blade sign that comes out from between each of the canopies and hangs down to just below that, below the canopy, so it can be seen, not be blocked by the canopy. Because really, right now, that perspective that we're looking at, standing on the sidewalk, you can't see the signs that are being proposed between the canopies, even as high as they are. So if we lowered them, like I forget who it was, somebody mentioned perhaps lowering them, I think that problem would be even worse. I don't know that this is the right solution. And just as you called my name, I was trying to get a better look, because I didn't get a chance to go out there and walk again. I was trying to get a better look in the photos of what looks like planters or something out in front of each of the storefronts, mostly, and wondering if something there might be more effective, but now I'm just thinking out loud. So, yeah, I don't know that this is the best solution. It is probably the least expensive solution, and it's happening all up and down Palm Canyon, but this is, like everybody has said, a pretty busy building, and with those canopies, I don't know this is really the best solution.
So let me pose this question. Could the alternative be that we do leave the higher height monument signage and have no signage in front of the businesses, as the monument signage being what informs the public of what business are in that place?
Can I float an idea out there?
Yeah.
As I look at the corner signage and the sort of elevation that we have, yep, but we can start there. You know, I think what might appeal more is if that signage was roughly what the scale we're looking at on that rendering there, but it had some type of landscape requirement to be maintained to kind of screen some of the other contrasting busy elements of the building and fire and plumbing apparatus on the side there, I think would help quite a bit. And then as I go to that other front elevation photo that you had, Ken, someone mentioned, maybe it was Kenny, about potentially those little islands out front as a location for signage, and if that were enhanced with some type of hedge or plant material, is that an option to float out there?
You could certainly make that as a recommendation, yes. In other words, landscaping that would soften the overall building in those planters that you're seeing, as well as something that would help to screen the fire hydrant Siamese connection.
I see Flynn's eyebrows furrowing over there.
Okay.
Keep in mind that you are reviewing a sign program, and we're trying to determine if the sign meets the city's criteria for approval. When we start getting into landscaping, that's kind of beyond a sign program and what we're considering here today. And while I do appreciate your attempts to help the applicant solve the problem, let's maybe focus our remarks on what is being proposed and give guidance as to whether or not it conforms with our criteria.
I think within the context, what we're struggling with is that, as was mentioned several times, that it's a highly detailed, composed building facade. So in order to add another element to this, which will be the signage, would really eliminate any type of sort of background plane that this building very much needs to have a sense of harmony. So that's why I think we're all struggling of having additional wordage on that back wall. So by keeping it clean on the monument signage, that's one option. The other option is to have blade signage, or the other signage, the other option is to see if a lower foreground signage could also be considered. But I think mainly we're struggling that the proposed current design within the context of the neighborhood and the business setting, I think it really challenges the context of the building itself. So it's a challenge, but I think it would be difficult to approve it the way it is right now, because I'm going on and on, but we're using every single sort of square footage. And I don't know, Ken, if the top balustrade was ever considered, because it's more linear and maybe it has a little bit of a spacing or pacing that you could do with a canopy. But having it on the side of the canopy is just not the right composition.
Are you envisioning that it might be some type of sign that would mount to the front of the balustrade, below the top railing?
Yeah, I'm trying here, yeah.
Well, currently, right now, there's 2 tenants that already occupy that space that have signs on those white spots. So that would be grandfathered in either way. There's currently one on the other side that's a hair salon that's been there that occupies 4 of the 6 spaces or 8 spaces, or they actually have the whole top on the left side, and their sign's already currently there. So we were only realistically looking at 2 new signs there, as the other 2 would be grandfathered in that are currently on the building.
Oh, they're already there.
And that was,
Yes.
member, or Chairwoman, that was part of why we went through a lot of different machinations on this, looking at some type of blade sign, looking at something that would be mounted on the canopies, below the canopies, in front of the windows. As you'd mentioned, the sort of hanging below the top of the column line, maybe in front of the windows as some type of a box sign. And each one began to clash with their signs that they have existing.
Oh, I see. Then it would be the new sign program with the current sign program.
Well, there's not a sign program in place now. They're just following the signs that are up there now are currently what's allowed within the city downtown. So we were trying to make it uniformed and bring in the monument sign and make one sign program. But right now, I guess if a tenant went in there, they could realistically use one of those 4 options that we recommended, and only gave 4 options because that's what the city allows in downtown Palm Springs, is one of those 4 different types of signs. So we put that in the program because if they, technically right now, if someone went and rented that space, from what I understand, they could pick one of those 4 options because that's what's allowed within the city sign program, or sign ordinance as it is today.
Okay, so.
So we gave them those options just because that's what the city ordinance allowed.
Okay, so Jack, we appreciate it. Right now, we have closed the public session, commentary session, and we're delivering here. Okay, thanks. Okay, so now that we have a little more background, is there a direction or a recommendation? Member Robert?
Can I ask, do you have any idea how big the pilasters are on each side of the stairs?
Probably a good 2 feet.
Are you talking about down at the sidewalk level?
Yes, down at the sidewalk level.
I'm going to estimate that they're about 3 feet wide and about 4 to 5 feet, if you want to say deep, from the face of the sidewalk backwards.
I think maybe that's a good location to put something, maybe mini monument signs, 2 of them, one for 2, as you're looking at the elevation, you could do one on either side of the stairs on the left and one on either side of the stairs on the right, and it would identify 2 potential tenants. And the reality is, Palm Canyon is one direction. People are going to, and it's not that big. Nobody's ever going to see the signs up high.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of renting the building, in terms of visibility for the businesses, and in terms of decluttering the building as much as possible, I'd like to suggest that maybe we do 2 small monument signs on one pilaster on each stair as an option.
Yes, Member Tom.
That was going to be my exact suggestion. I think those plinths that exist on either side of the stairs could make a great base for a smaller monument sign, not do the monument sign that's has all 4 buildings, but just have either 4 smaller ones or 2 signs of 2 each. Because the building doesn't need anything else put on it. So I think if we can keep that off of the building, it's going to help.
And now also it seems like it would integrate better with the transition of if a new tenant moves in, then it would be the new signage at the plinth. And so slowly, you know, it will get off from the building facade. Yeah. Member Ken, Member.
Thank you. I understand what you're suggesting. The only point I might add to your thoughts are, if I'm understanding the building's architecture correctly, you can see that center canopy, it comes out toward the sidewalk.
Yes.
So you would be suggesting placing 2 monument signs probably at the 2 side stairways, because I don't think there's any top surface area on the plinths that are adjacent to the paseo.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting.
Oh, okay, great.
That's correct.
But can I ask for clarification on something?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was looking for the lettering sizes or the template for the, I see it, I got it now. So 14-inch high by 5 foot. See, I don't think, Ken, that those are 4 or 5 feet deep, those pilasters supporting the railings. I think they're closer to 42 inches deep and maybe 22 inches wide. So if we're proposing that this type of
No.
template be used to apply to the sides of those,
No.
I see.
But it would be in proportion, it will have to be a different design. Yeah, we're not asking to chop this and then put it on top of the plinth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so Ken, so I think right now we're trying to work with the architecture that exists. And there seems to be a recommendation or a direction to work with what is there existing and to compose it better with the sort of the landscape plinth stair composition. That's a complete different design. If we make those recommendations, it would be a denial of this project with those recommendations for a resubmittal.
You would be recommending a revise and resubmit.
Correct. Correct.
And if I'm understanding correctly, the notion would be that, assuming that you had 4 tenants, for example, on the plinths that we're looking at here, the monument sign would be one single box with some type of a appropriate divider between the 2 faces, so that you're not dealing with multiple boxes or elements on top of these plinths. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's clear.
Okay, so we have a motion. Member Sean?
Sorry, just one
Yeah.
more clarification. Are we throwing this out there as a second or third option in addition to potentially the front planters, or is that this is the only direction that we're sending them home with in this motion?
And I thought the planters that you were referring is on the side of the plinths?
I believe so, in between the plinths. So if you look at the front elevation, I thought that was what Kenny was proposing.
Yeah, there are what appears to be, and I seem to recall, being planters in between the plinths.
What kind of in between those?
In between the stairs and plinths.
Right.
So there's only 2 of them that we're talking about. Yes, there and there. That's where I was proposing some sort of basically 2 small monument signs.
I'd be open to that. I was proposing it to be on top of the plinths,
But-
next to the stairs, but
Actually, I think
if
that's
there's, huh?
Actually, I think this is better.
Yeah,
think- yeah, I think
that
it'd be
would be,
less-
I'd
Because
be
it's
open to that.
away from the, Yeah.
More visually appealing, I think, and fewer signs. Right,
Yep.
right.
Yep.
So, did we have a motion that was actually
No, it
floated?
was just a discussion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was asking if, do we give them both options as potential? But
I was just going to suggest a motion to continue this item, have them resubmit it with a design that incorporates two smaller monument signs, two tenants each, somewhere in the planter area. That would be the motion.
Okay, is,
Totally okay to not second that and redo it.
or it's totally okay to second that and have a modification?
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
I'll second that, and would I make a modification now?
Okay, so,
Yes.
yes. Modification?
I'd like to give them the option of one or the other, that they could explore one or the other, but preferably not both.
So either on the plinth or between the plinths.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay. Anybody,
I'm okay with that.
you're okay with the originator? The originator has accepted the revision. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to new business item 4, Matthew Signs Incorporated, proposing an amendment to an existing sign program to increase height for a main sign for sub-major tenants at the Spring Shopping Center located at 5200 East Ramon Road. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think all of you are familiar with the Spring Shopping Center. This sign program was initially approved by the City Council shortly after the approval of the project. It's gone through several amendments, as you can see on pages 2 and 3 of your staff report. Burlington has existing signs on their building right now. They have a sign on the front, if you go to page 5 of your staff report, and they have a sign on the back side, which is facing toward San Luis Rey Drive. The request is to enlarge the height of the sign on the west facade, or their main facade, from 4 feet to 7 foot 4 feet. As you'll see on page 6 of your staff report, this center has a hierarchy of signs in terms of from anchor tenant to major tenant to sub-major, and then what they call in-line. The largest sign, obviously, is the anchor tenant, which is Home Depot. And then the signs, go progressively smaller from that point. The sub-major tenant, which Burlington is a sub-major tenant, the sign that they have right now in terms of height is the maximum allowable by the sign program. And as I've noted at the bottom of page 6, certainly, signs in commercial centers of this size could have signage up to 12 feet in height, but as we've identified in the staff report, it doesn't seem that sign or letter height is really what's going to crack this nut on this particular problem. They have both an issue of visibility once you enter this 36-acre shopping center, by nature of just the sheer size of it, of course, but also you've got the code requirement for shade trees in this project, but also it's a matter of how do you get there? And they are located on the eastern side of the shopping center. They're one of the fewer, maybe the only sub-major tenant that is not on a major thoroughfare, or as you see, the sub-majors that are next to Home Depot, which is like Bed Bath & Beyond, and the other tenants along that particular line of stores. I've also identified in your staff report, sorry, I'll get this on the screen for you. Bear with me a second, please. Oh, maybe she doesn't have this loaded for me. Okay. In your staff report, there's a site map, and I've shown with arrows the vehicular entries into this center, and I've shown with stars where there are existing monument signs. Burlington is on 2 of these monument signs, I believe, and I've discussed briefly that there's a little bit of challenge with these monument signs and the landscaping that's starting to compete with it. What we believe in looking at this overall project is that Burlington certainly has a concern with their signage, but it may be an issue of wayfinding and directional signage rather than ever increasingly large signage. And that's where we're really suggesting may be the right answer on this project, which, as you see in our conclusion on the last page of your staff report, the recommendation we have would be to relocate much of the landscape material that's beginning to obscure the monument signs, but then to also look at this project maybe a little bit differently rather than a larger main sign, a matter of finding an effective way of doing directional and wayfinding signage and keep the signs that they currently have. The applicant, I believe, is in the audience and can further clarify their concerns and their reasons for presenting it, and that is our recommendation, and I'm available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions for staff? Member Tom?
On the colored elevation that you're showing, is this the new sign to scale, or is this the existing sign?
On this, that's the proposed.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Member Ken.
I may have been looking at the pretty pictures and missed it if you said this. Excuse me. So this would be larger than the sign, the proposed sign, new sign, would be larger than the sign program allows, but how does it compare to what city sign ordinance?
I didn't hear you. How does it compare to what?
How does it compare to what city signage ordinance would allow outside of the individual signage program?
The signage, the sign ordinance, the basic sign ordinance, if you were just to look at it, is going to be based on the, the sentence that I'd put into the staff report about maximum heights. So when you start to get into larger and larger shopping centers, the basic sign ordinance allows very large signage in terms of its height. But when you look at this particular signage relative to all of the signage that's been approved for the center, it becomes the largest sign in the whole center.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, Madam Chair, there was a question about understanding what is being proposed versus what is existing. And if you compare the image that's on the screen right now with the image that's on page 5 of your staff report showing the west elevation of the building, I believe you can begin to see the difference in size that they're proposing.
So Ken, when you mentioned in the conclusion about wayfinding and directional signages, are those wayfinding directionals something that is permanent or something that is temporary during business hours and then they gather it and then put it back into the shop?
Oh no, these would be permanent. What we've seen in doing our research on this is there's a number of and often I think many of us who have traveled around Southern California in some of these very large shopping centers like this one, you will often see wayfinding signage that's directing you to various parts of the shopping center. But in addition to that, what we've also seen is there's a number of shopping centers that are actually developing this wayfinding signage with LED technology in which they can actually change the information on the screen. So the example might be you may have a screen on these pylons or columns, if you will, of signage in which Burlington's sign is there. But you may have another situation in which perhaps one of the tenants has a special that they could actually modify the illuminated sign. It's entirely, it's very, very flexible, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not proposing one thing or the other. We're simply thinking that wayfinding might be the way of getting this particular tenant a better ability to be found.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Okay, is the applicant present? Name and address?
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Reyes-Prepero, and 9932 Prospect Avenue, Studio 137. This is Scott, where he's the owner of my company. I'd like to just clarify a couple things in the agenda. Burlington's actually a major tenant. It's not sub-major, so it's the second category down from Anchor, not the third. We have 4,700 plus square feet, so that puts us in a major tenant category. Let's see here. So we're proposing to increase the size of our sign, and as you can see in the paperwork that you have, we're also proposing to nest the tagline up into the Burlington, which lowers the overall square footage. We have sort of a unique situation here, and I find this often because I work with Burlington a lot, is the fact that we are confined by the uses of the usage of our registered and trademark logo. So with the exception of the the lower descending G, and also the ascending accent element, our logo, the heart, the bulk of our signage is actually within the 35-inch range here. So if you compare the proposed application to, say, block letters, for instance, Ross is in that shopping center, and also Dollar Tree, they get a greater overall mass in their signage, which makes it hard for Burlington to compete with them when it comes to height requirements. So the mean height of all of our letters is about 40 inches in this entire sign. We are in agreement with the city on the intent and the aesthetic of the current sign program that you have. We want our sign to look nice, and as you can see, it's not overstated what we're proposing. I think fits better and congruent with the actual sign band itself. It's not offensive. So if you look at the site plan, if you could just put the site plan up there for me. Burlington has, in this shopping center, the worst view from that city, the Gene Autry Way. It's set back 1,120 feet from the street itself. So they're really looking to do anything they can to make it competitive with the other tenants in the shopping center. He also stated that we're bumping up our logo from 48 inches to 7 feet 4 inches, which isn't accurate. The 48 inches is actually measuring the heart logo. It's a letter height maximum. So we're only going up from 48 inches to 66 inches, which is 4 feet to 5'6", not 7 feet 4 inches. That's the overall height of the entire sign, including the tagline. Which it's actually, the sign criteria speaks to the letter height and not the sign height. So you'll see that in the shopping center as well. A lot of people have taglines that aren't included in that 48-inch maximum. So we'd like to propose adding a stipulation to the sign criteria stating the following. The height shall be determined as a measurement of the tenant letter logo or logo box height. Ascending accent element and our lowercase descenders may be excluded from determining the overall height of the tenant's display with the landlord's approval. The tenant may display its trademark logo without letters and exceed the display height restrictions, so as long as the bulk of the display is within the 48-inch height requirement. So we want to amend the sign criteria for precisely the concern that we have sort of a weird font and a weird logo. It doesn't comply with those block letter standards that we often see where these tenants sort of get more visibility than Burlington would simply because its logo, its font is different. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we also...
Can you get closer to the microphone?
Sorry.
Okay.
If you go back to the elevation, this sign was actually designed for the size of the elevation. It's more congruent. If you look at Bed Bath & Beyond and Ross Dress for Less, it's more aesthetically equal to them. I mean, with the background to the letters, you get the 60-40 rule of readability and what have you.
We drove around there this morning just to sort of get an idea, and it was like, wow, Marshall, Burlington, you know, it was sort of hard to see that.
And in agreement with wayfinding would be great for the whole center, not just Burlington, but for the whole center, because the shade trees and what have you, that whole center needs it, not just Burlington.
The whole center is growing.
Okay, questions for applicant? Yes, Member Robert.
The proposed new sign, how is it positioned in comparison to the original in terms of height? I mean,
It's centered vertically and it's centered horizontally, just exactly the same as the other sign.
So the tagline will be a little bit lower, the Burlington will be a little higher, and the new sign?
It kind of squeezes together.
Yeah, but
And it's
everything.
going to get shifted down slightly.
Everything would be equal, just like the existing signs.
And so part of your argument was that the height of the Earlington and the tagline are, it's not, what, on the existing sign, what's the mean height of the letters?
The mean height of the letters on a 48-inch sign
On the
is
existing sign,
24 inches.
24
No,
inches?
excuse me. The bulk of our sign is within 24 inches on that, so it'd probably be half. So I would estimate 32
So you're proposing to go from 32 essentially up to 40?
in the mean.
In the mean. Okay. All right, thank you.
Just so that, I just want to make a clarification. On page 507 of the report that Ken has prepared, it shows a photograph of the Burlington existing main wall sign on the top of the page. And what they're proposing is that rendering there that you see with the 62-foot long and then the 6 foot some, I think you said 6'8", not 7'2".
6'6", yes, the 6'6" Burlington.
Okay, 66 inches. So in addition to that, I also wanted to ask you on the Burlington signage that's on Ramon, which is our second photograph on the staff report. You also requesting for that signage to?
No.
Okay.
Point of clarification, that's facing San Luis Rey, that does not face Ramon.
San Luis Rey, yes.
That's correct.
Yeah, and that's a 48-inch sign.
And I know this is splitting hair, but that's actually a logo and not a letter, right? Yes, that is splitting hairs. The heart itself?
Yeah, because it's 20% bigger than the rest of the sign, and also it's the heart, considered a logo.
Okay, other questions for the applicant? Okay, Member Tom.
It's much clearer to me as I look at this drawing that you have on page 4 where the things are dimensioned. Are the words in black in the tagline, are those illuminated or are they just?
Yes, sir, they're illuminated. Those are illuminated channel letters.
And individual letters? Thank you.
Okay, Member Tom.
On my first review of it, my feeling is when I look at the background for where the sign is going, that the existing sign looks, I think the word is not in proportion to that. So I feel that the background for the sign and the new proposed sign, the proportion does work better.
Thank you.
Hey, Member John, any questions or comments? Questions, yeah.
The existing Burlington sign, is the tagline, how are those illuminated?
Cabinet tagline, so it has a face and it's backlit.
Okay. And is the brightness of the sign remaining the same?
Yes.
Is it increasing? Is it?
It's the exact same LEDs, they're just going to be used in a different way.
Sorry, but actually they will dim down because right now you got that whole background that's white and the letters are black and the letters on the existing sign do not illuminate because they're black. The new sign, they are black letters, but they're that new vinyl where it just lets a little bit of light through, so at night you'll get like a gray color out of it. It'll be a white, but it'll be a dimmer white.
Right. My first time doing this, by the way, of learning, so.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions from the applicant, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to start with all the way from the front. Member Kenny.
At first, I was thinking that going larger on the signage really wasn't going to resolve the problem, and I don't understand why we can't resolve it in a different way. But I do agree with the comment that was made about the proposed sign being more in proportion with the background that it sits in front And if it is indeed the case that this is a major tenant, as opposed to a sub-major tenant, then perhaps that changes the nature of the prominence that their signage should be allowed to have. So I've moved more towards the middle, and I'm feeling a little bit more like this is probably fine. I don't feel real strongly about it, but that's where I am.
Member Sean?
Yeah, this looks fine to me.
Okay, Member Robert?
I'm in agreement.
Anybody who's not in agreement? I'd like to pose this, okay. So is there a motion?
I'll move to approve as submitted.
Okay, all those in favor?
Second.
Oh, second? Thank you, Sean. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
You were nervous after those first two, weren't you?
Okay, but next time, slow down. Slow down. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I know. That was my concern. Okay, this is the time for any committee member comments. Any comments from? Yeah, I have one. It's way too early, but I'm super organized, so that's what happens. I believe Kenny and I are termed out in June of 2018. So I like to encourage and uplift my fellow members to take on the torch and consider chair and co-chair positions. That's all. Director, do you have any comments?
How does that work exactly? The nomination or whatever of chair and co-chair?
We have in our bylaws for the AAC that we select a new chair and co-chair typically at the beginning of the fiscal year. So usually the last meeting in June, we should be doing that unless we haven't appointed new members yet. And then sometimes we delay those decisions. But we do that as part of the schedule of the meeting so that we take nominations in the meeting itself and vote on the nominations there.
Any comments from the?
Just a reminder to all of our committee members that if you are going to be absent for a meeting, if you could let us know as soon as possible so that we can invite either Sheila or Stephen to attend. They need a couple days' notice on being able to be here at the meeting, so we'd just appreciate that.
I think maybe it would be easier if we all confirm that we are coming, instead of no response means that we're coming. That would help our director. Okay, having said that, it is 5 o'clock and we're adjourned.
Thank you.